June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The sea is steel gray, chopped into short violent waves by a cold channel wind. The landing craft bucks like a wounded animal as it grinds toward the shore. Inside, Private First Class Daniel Mercer grips his M1 Gare, and so tightly his knuckles burn white beneath the salt spray. The smell is a mixture of diesel fuel, vomit, wet wool, and fear. Somewhere to his left, a man is praying out loud. Somewhere behind him, another is retching over the gunwale. The ramp hasn't dropped yet, but the war has already found them. Machine gun fire cracks across the water, sharp and flat, skipping like stones. Tracers rake the surf. An officer at the front, First Lieutenant James Holloway, 29th Infantry Division, glances at his watch, then back toward the beach. His jaw is clenched so hard it trembles. 30 seconds, he shouts, though the men already know. Ahead of them, Omaha Beach rises steeply from the surf, a crescent of sand hemmed in by bluffs and concrete. German fortifications crouch in the hills like teeth pillboxes, trenches, steel obstacles, all manned by the 7th Army's veterans. The enemy has elevation, fields of fire, pre-registered artillery. Everything a defender could ask for. The ramp slams down, men spill forward into waist, deep water. Some are hit before they can take 2 steps. Mercer stumbles, recovers, pushes on. His boots fill instantly. He can hear bullets snapping past his ears, striking helmets with hollow metallic thuds. To his right, a man collapses face, first into the surf, his pack dragging him under. Mercer doesn't stop. Nobody stops. There is no cover, not really. Farther down the beach, British units are landing on gold. Canadians are hitting Juno. Their approaches are difficult, brutal, but the terrain gives them more room to maneuver. Tanks land closer to shore, artillery finds gaps, they are ordered to consolidate, to secure flanks, to hold ground. Here at Omaha, the Americans are ordered to attack. Move, move, Holloway yells, waving his men forward. There is nowhere else to go but up. The beach is a killing ground, and the orders do not change. Mercer reaches a line of Czech hedgehogs, rusted steel crosses half, buried in sand, and throws himself down behind one. The protection is psychological more than real. A mortar round lands nearby, showering him with grit and fragments of metal. He tastes blood and sand. He thinks of home, of a factory floor in Ohio that never stops producing rifles and tanks and trucks. He does not know why that thought comes to him now. Then the whistle blows again. Forward. And they go. This is how the Americans fight here, not because they enjoy it, not because they misunderstand the danger, but because someone far above this beach has already made the calculation. Losses are expected. Replacements are available. The line must move. By mid-morning, Omaha is littered with wrecked landing craft, burn, doubt tanks and bodies tangled in the surf. Yet the pressure never fully lifts. Small groups of infantry claw their way up ravines, through wire and minefields, using Bangalore torpedoes and bare hands. Naval guns offshore hammer the bluffs. Destroyers edge dangerously close, firing point blank to suppress German positions. The Americans do not stop attacking, not because it is easy, but because it is the doctrine. Hours later, when the beachhead finally cracks open, Allied commanders take stock. British and Canadian sectors are advancing inland in planned phases, methodical and deliberate. At Omaha, American units are scattered, bloodied, but somehow through the German line. The price has been staggering. For many Allied officers watching the reports come in, the question forms quietly but urgently. Why were the Americans pushed so hard, so directly, while others were allowed to hold, maneuver, or wait? The answer did not begin on this beach. 3 years earlier, half a world away, another shoreline had burned under American boots. August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The jungle breathes hot, wet, alive. Cicadas scream so loudly they drown out distant artillery. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty, Puller crouches behind a palm log, binoculars pressed to his face. Ahead of him, the Japanese perimeter bristles with machine guns dug deep into coral and earth. The Marines are low on sleep, low on food, low on patience. The order comes down the line anyway. Attack. There is no elegant maneuver, no wide flanking march through friendly territory. The terrain makes such things impossible. The enemy must be pushed back or destroyed, position by position. The Marines move forward through a grass that slices their arms and legs, through mud that swallows boots whole. Japanese fire erupts, disciplined and deadly. Men fall, corpsemen crawl forward under fire, dragging the wounded back by their webbing, and still the line advances. Nearby, Australian coast watchers and Allied naval forces play their roles, spotting, blocking, harassing. But the ground fight, the brutal close combat, belongs to the Americans. Puller watches his men push through a storm of lead and steel and does not call them back. He cannot. The airfield Henderson Field must be taken and held. Without it, the Pacific campaign collapses. This too shocks observers. British officers, veterans of the First World War, recognize the cost immediately. They have learned painfully what frontal assaults can do to an army. Their doctrine emphasizes set piece battles, artillery preparation, and deliberate advances. Caution is survival, but the Americans are different not because they are reckless, but because they are new to this kind of war and backed by something unprecedented. Behind Puller's Marines, behind Mercer at Omaha, lies an industrial machine the world has never seen. Ships cross oceans without pause. Factories run day and night. Training camps fill with men faster than units can lose them. Replacement battalions wait in England, in California, in staging areas across the globe. American commanders know this, even if the men in the foxholes do not. At staff tables lit by shaded lamps, generals talk in terms of tonnage and throughput. Ammunition expenditure, vehicle attrition, manpower flow. They understand that American strength is not elegance, it is endurance. If a position can be overwhelmed with firepower and bodies, it will be. And so again and again, Americans are sent forward in Sicily, in Italy at places like Salerno and Anzio, in the hedgerows of Normandy, where every field becomes a fortress and every advance costs blood. Allied units on the flanks secure ground, anchor lines, and wait for the Americans to break through the hardest points. The men notice. Mercer notices it weeks after Omaha, pushing through blockage so thick it feels like fighting the earth itself. British armor waits until lanes are cleared. American infantry clears them with grenades, flamethrowers, and rifle fire at point blank range. He does not know the doctrine by name. He only knows the order. Forward. This approach unsettles allies and enemies alike. German officers note it in reports. The Americans absorb losses and continue attacking where other armies might pause. Japanese commanders, accustomed to breaking enemy morale through casualties, find the Americans disturbingly persistent. The war grinds on, and the pattern repeats. The question is no longer whether the Americans will attack it, is how long they can keep doing it. Standing on that blood-soaked sand at Omaha, with smoke drifting low over the beach and the wounded crying out for medics, the answer seems impossible. And yet the attacks continue, because somewhere beyond the horizon, ships are already coming. The smoke still hangs over Omaha Beach as the wounded are carried past shattered obstacles and burning craft. The attack has not stopped, it has only moved inland, June 7, 1944, 1 mile beyond the Normandy shoreline. The hedgerows rise like walls, ancient earthworks packed with roots, stone, and centuries of soil. Sergeant William Klein presses his back against one, listening to bullets thud into the far side. Each field is a room, each opening a doorway covered by German guns. The air smells of crushed grass and cordite. Klein has fought alongside British units before. He remembers how they paused, how they brought up artillery, how they waited until everything was aligned. Here, there is no waiting. Prep fire in 5. Comes the call over the radio. Infantry moves immediately after. 5 minutes later, the American guns speak not cautiously, not sparingly, but in overwhelming volume. 105mm shells scream overhead. The ground shakes. Dirt rains down like hail. Then the barrage lifts, and the whistle blows again. Go! Klein and his squad surge forward through a gap blasted into the hedge by explosives. A German machine gun opens up instantly. 2 men go down. The others keep moving, firing from the hip, shouting, throwing grenades into a sunken lane ahead. This is not improvisation. This is design. American doctrine, refined rapidly since 1941, is built on momentum. Commanders are taught that stopping invites counterattack, that hesitation gives the enemy time to reset. If resistance is met, it is not bypassed, it is crushed with firepower, then rolled over. British observers note the difference with a mix of admiration and concern. They understand attrition all too well. They lived through it at the Somme and Passchendaele. Their instinct is preservation, hold the line, grind carefully, conserve men. The Americans, by contrast, treat manpower differently, not casually but numerically. At Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, planners track casualty rates like production figures. They know how many infantry divisions can be rotated, how many replacements can be shipped from the United States each month, how many rifles, trucks, tanks, and artillery pieces will arrive regardless of losses. General Omar Bradley, commanding 1st Army, does not speak of heroics when he orders attacks. He speaks of pressure, of keeping the Germans off balance, of forcing them to react, retreat, or die. To Bradley, the worst thing an American unit can do is stop moving. This thinking shocks some Allied officers. A Canadian colonel, watching an American assault bog down under fire, reportedly mutters that it looks like 1916 all over again. But the Americans are not charging blindly. Behind every advance comes artillery, air support, naval guns, logistics columns stretching back to the beaches. The attack is the tip of a massive, rolling system. Nowhere is this clearer than in the Pacific. November 20th, 1943, Tarawa Atoll. The lagoon is deceptively calm, turquoise under a blazing sun. But beneath the surface, coral reefs tear open landing craft and leave Marines waiting hundreds of yards under fire. Major Michael Ryan shouts himself hoarse, waving men forward as Japanese guns rake the water. There is no flank to secure here, no Allied army holding a line beside them, just a narrow strip of sand ringed by bunkers and seawalls. The casualties are immediate and horrific. Japanese defenders fight to the death, emerging from spider holes and concrete pillboxes to fire at point-blank range. Marines respond with grenades, flamethrowers, demolition charges. Every yard is paid for. Naval officers watching from offshore are stunned. They did not expect such losses so quickly. Some wonder if the assault should be halted, reconsidered. It is not. Within 76 hours, Tarawa is taken. The cost is high, but the lesson is clear to American planners. Even the strongest fixed defenses can be overwhelmed if enough force is applied fast enough. This becomes the template on Saipan, on Peleliu. On Iwo Jima, American units are often ordered into the teeth of enemy defenses, while Allied navies isolate the battlefield and other forces secure perimeter roles. The Americans are the hammer. To the Japanese, this is incomprehensible. Their doctrine emphasizes breaking enemy will through casualties. They expect repeated attacks to falter, morale to crack. It does not. Replacement units arrive. Supplies never seem to run out. Wounded Marines are evacuated, patched up, and sometimes return to the line within weeks. The machine keeps feeding the front. Back in Europe, German intelligence reports grow increasingly alarmed. They note that American divisions recover faster than expected, that losses which would cripple another army barely slow U.S. operations. A German staff officer writes that the Americans fight like engineers, solving problems with resources rather than finesse. He is not wrong. This does not mean American soldiers are fearless or expendable. Far from it. They are terrified, exhausted, angry. They curse their officers and cling to the dirt when shells fall. But the system around them does not pause to accommodate fear. Orders come down. Objectives are assigned. Timetables are enforced. In Italy, at Anzio, American troops are ordered to push inland despite fierce resistance and unclear intelligence. British forces dig in defensively nearby, wary of overextension. The Americans attack, are thrown back, attack again, losses mount. The beachhead nearly collapses, yet the line holds barely until reinforcements arrive. This willingness to absorb punishment and continue forward becomes both a strength and a controversy. Allied commanders debate it quietly. Some argue the Americans are wasting lives unnecessarily. Others point out that every mile gained shortens the war. For American high command, the calculus is grim but simple. Prolongation costs more lives overall. If aggressive action can break the enemy sooner, it must be taken. This belief is not universal, but it is powerful. By 1944, the United States is producing more war material than all Axis powers combined. Liberty ships slide into the water faster than German U-boats can sink them. Airfields sprout overnight. Roads are laid, bridges thrown across rivers under fire. American infantry attacks are never meant to stand alone. They are supported by everything that industry can provide. And so, when Allied units take cover, anchor lines, or wait for conditions to improve, American units are often ordered forward not because they are expendable, but because they are sustainable. The men on the ground rarely hear this explanation. Sergeant Klein does not know about shipping tonnage or replacement flow. He only knows that when the Germans fire, he fires back and then advances when told. At night, in muddy foxholes, he listens to British artillery rumble somewhere off to the flank, steady and controlled. He listens to American guns thunder closer, more frequent, more aggressive. Two different philosophies fighting the same war. As Normandy grinds forward, the hedgerows begin to fall. The breakout will come violently, suddenly when American armor and infantry punch through at St-Lo. When that happens, the Germans will finally crack. But before that moment arrives, thousands more Americans will be ordered to attack straight ahead into fire that everyone knows is waiting, because the machine demands momentum. And momentum, once lost, is far harder to regain than ground. The hedgerows shake under the weight of American artillery, and somewhere beyond them, German lines begin to bend. The momentum the doctrine demands is finally building. July 25, 1944. Near St-Lo, Normandy, the sky itself seems to rip apart. Operation Cobra begins not with infantry, but with air power on a scale the battlefield has never seen. Thousands of American bombers roar overhead, engines droning so loud they drown out every other sound. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hastings watches from a slit trench as the first bombs fall short, then closer, then directly into German positions. The ground convulses, smoke boils upward in black and red columns. Shockwaves roll across the fields like surf. Men press their helmets down, mouths open to equalize the pressure. This is attrition, mechanized. When the bombing lifts, American infantry and armor surge forward through a landscape that barely resembles Earth anymore. German defenders are stunned, deafened, buried alive. Resistance exists in pockets, but it is fragmented, desperate. British units to the east hold firm, fixing German armor in place around Keene. They are doing exactly what they were ordered to do: absorb pressure, contain, prevent maneuver. The Americans are doing what they were ordered to do: break through at any cost. The two approaches meet in the middle of victory. Hastings moves with his men, stepping over shattered equipment and bodies half covered by soil. A German soldier stumbles out of a crater, hands raised, eyes vacant. He is no longer fighting, he has been produced, out-supplied, outlasted. This is the culmination of years of planning. American commanders have learned that firepower can replace time. Where other armies wait, the Americans overwhelm. Where others conserve, the Americans expend shells, fuel, aircraft, and lives in the belief that the enemy's reserves will collapse first. It is not elegant. It is effective. German generals understand the danger immediately. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge reports that American attacks feel limitless. Even when repulsed, they return, reinforced, supported by more guns, more tanks, more aircraft. A German regiment might lose a third of its men and be combat ineffective. An American regiment takes similar losses and is reinforced within days. The imbalance grows wider with every week. In the Pacific, the pattern is even starker. February 19, 1945, Iwo Jima. The sand is volcanic, soft and black, swallowing boots with every step. Mount Suribachi looms ahead, riddled with tunnels and artillery positions invisible from the beach. Major General Harry Schmidt knows exactly what waits for his Marines: a fortress designed to kill attackers. The order stands: attack. For days, Marines advance yards at a time, using tanks fitted with flamethrowers to clear bunkers, sealing tunnels with explosives, calling in naval gunfire almost on top of their own positions. Casualties are catastrophic. Allied observers, British naval officers, Commonwealth liaison staff watch with a mixture of horror and disbelief. No European army would accept such losses for such limited ground, but for the Americans, Iwo Jima is not about terrain. It is about inevitability. Every bunker destroyed is one less threat. Every position taken is permanent. The Marines do not withdraw. They rotate units, bring up replacements, and keep pushing. The Japanese defenders, who expected to inflict such losses that the Americans would abandon the island, realize too late that this enemy measures victory differently. Attrition works both ways, but only one side can sustain it indefinitely. Back in Europe, after the breakout from Normandy, American forces drive hard across France. At places like Mortagne, German counterattacks crash into American lines with ferocity, but they are met with artillery concentrations that obliterate entire formations. British and Canadian forces advance more deliberately, methodically clearing ground, maintaining cohesion. The Americans race forward, accepting disorganization as the price of speed. This difference is visible even in command culture. American junior officers are encouraged to act, to seize initiative, to push ahead even when plans unravel. British doctrine emphasizes control, coordination, and careful alignment. Neither is wrong, but the American approach assumes that mistakes can be fixed with resources. At Falaise, the gap closes late. Thousands of Germans escape who might have been captured. Critics later argue that a more cautious American advance allowed the enemy to flee. Others counter that without the relentless American pressure, the German front would never have collapsed at all. The debate lasts decades. For the men fighting, there is no debate. Private Mercer, now a veteran of hedgerow fighting, rides on the back of a Sherman tank as it clanks through a French village. Civilians cheer, throw flowers. He smiles weakly. He has seen too much to feel triumph. He knows the pattern now. When resistance appears, they will attack. When it stiffens, they will attack harder. When losses mount, more men will arrive. The Americans do not maneuver around the problem, they consume it. This philosophy reaches its peak in the final year of the war, across the Rhine, through the Hürtgen forest. Into the heart of Germany, American units are repeatedly ordered to assault heavily defended positions that others might bypass or contain. The Hürtgen, in particular, becomes a symbol of attritional excess dense forest, limited visibility, murderous artillery. Casualties soar for minimal gain. Even American commanders later question the cost. Yet at the time the logic holds, pressure must be constant. The enemy must never be allowed to rest. To Allied partners, this approach is both a gift and a warning. It allows them to operate more conservatively, to preserve strength, to rely on American breakthroughs. But it also highlights a divide in how war is understood. For Britain, with a smaller population and memories of the trenches, manpower is precious. For the United States, with continents of factories and millions of men, manpower is a resource to be managed grimly, reluctantly, but deliberately. This does not make American soldiers expendable. It makes them part of a system that values results over elegance. By the time American and Soviet forces meet on the Elbe, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The Axis has been crushed not just by bravery, but by volume of steel, fuel, and human endurance. Looking back, the question is not why the Americans attacked while others took cover. It is how long any enemy could survive against an army that treated attrition itself as a weapon. The attritional machine keeps rolling, grinding down enemy forces across continents. Victory draws closer, but the cost becomes impossible to ignore. September 17, 1944, near Eindhoven, the Netherlands. The sky is filled with parachutes. Operation Market Garden unfolds in chaos and optimism. American airborne troops from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions drop behind enemy lines, scattered by wind and flak. Private Thomas Alvarez lands hard in a beet field, his leg screaming in pain as he drags himself toward a hedgerow. The plan demands speed. Bridges must be seized before German forces can react. British armor will follow, racing up a narrow corridor. It is bold, aggressive, and unforgiving. American paratroopers are ordered to attack immediately to push outward, seize ground, and hold it at all costs. British ground forces advance cautiously behind them, constrained by roads and logistics. The gap between aggression and method becomes lethal. Alvarez and his squad assault a German-held farmhouse, grenades through windows, rifles barking in short, violent bursts. The Germans fall back, then counterattack within hours. The Americans dig in, low on ammunition, waiting for relief that comes slower than planned. Market Garden ultimately fails, and the blame is shared. But among the men on the ground, the pattern feels familiar. Americans take the forward risk, absorb the initial shock, and hold on while the larger Allied machine struggles to align. The shock is not limited to combat. British officers visiting American field hospitals are struck by the scale. Rows of wounded stretch beyond sight, men with missing limbs, shattered faces, shell shock that leaves them staring blankly at nothing. The Americans evacuate aggressively, moving casualties rearward with speed and efficiency, replacing them almost immediately. The British system emphasizes recovery and conservation. The American system emphasizes throughput. Neither is humane. Both are necessary. The friction between these philosophies surfaces repeatedly in planning meetings. British commanders worry that American aggressiveness invites unnecessary losses. American commanders worry that British caution prolongs the war. The argument is never resolved, it is simply overridden by events. December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls thick and heavy. The cold bites through wool and leather alike. American units hold thinly spread lines in what is supposed to be a quiet sector. When German armor crashes through in a surprise offensive, the Americans are hit hardest again. At Bastogne, surrounded and outnumbered, American paratroopers dig in. General Anthony McAuliffe's response to a German surrender demand is brief and defiant. Nuts, the defense becomes legend, but it is also a product of doctrine. American units are taught to hold, absorb, and endure until relief arrives. They trust that somewhere behind them, the system is already moving to save them. And it does. Artillery pounds German columns. Air power, once the weather clears, annihilates exposed units. Reinforcements flood in. The bulge is contained, then erased. Allied partners play crucial roles. British forces secure the northern shoulder, preventing collapse. But once again, the heaviest blow falls on American infantry. The human cost accumulates. Letters home change in tone. Early optimism gives way to weariness. Men write less about victory and more about survival. They joke darkly about being used up, about being replaced like parts in a machine. Some resent it. Others accept it as the price of ending the war. Officers carry the burden differently. Company commanders watch their rosters shrink and refill with strangers. They learn names, then lose them. They order attacks knowing exactly what it will cost. Many struggle with that knowledge long after the war ends. Allies observe this with unease. A British major notes in his diary that the Americans fight like giants, but bleed like men. A Canadian officer remarks that American courage seems boundless and endlessly tested. Even enemies notice. Captured German soldiers express surprise at how quickly American units recover from losses. One veteran says he expected the Americans to break after Normandy. Another admits that by 1945 they no longer believed American morale could be shattered. In the Pacific, Japanese officers come to the same conclusion. The Americans do not stop, they replace, they return. This realization drains hope, yet the cost is not abstract. It is paid in names etched on crosses and stars of David, in cemeteries that stretch for miles. It is paid in men who return home changed, carrying the war inside them. By the spring of 1945, the Allies are closing in from all sides. The end is visible. The American approach has worked brutally, decisively. But as victory approaches, the question lingers in quiet moments. Could it have been done differently? Could fewer men have died? Among historians, the debate will never end. Among the soldiers who advanced when ordered, there is no debate at all. They did what was asked because they believed the system would carry them through or because they had no other choice. The Americans attacked while others took cover, not out of indifference, but because their nation had built a war machine that made such attacks possible and expected. The shock of that reality echoed across battlefields and planning rooms alike. as the guns fall silent. The legacy of that doctrine remains written not just in victory maps, but in blood. The war grinds toward its conclusion, leaving behind shattered cities, exhausted armies, and questions that will never fully fade. April 12, 1945, near the Elbe River, Germany, the river runs cold and fast, swollen with spring melt. American infantry from the 69th Infantry Division move cautiously through ruined villages, rifles up, nerves stretched thin. The enemy is collapsing, but danger still lives in every tree line and cellar. Sergeant William Klein pauses on a hill overlooking the water. Across the river, Soviet troops are rumored to be advancing. The end is close now, everyone can feel it, but the orders remain the same. Advance, secure, hold. Even here, even now, American units push forward while Allied partners coordinate boundaries and consolidation. The doctrine does not soften with proximity to victory. Momentum must be maintained until the very last moment. When American and Soviet patrols finally meet, shaking hands amid the ruins, it feels surreal. The war that demanded endless forward motion has finally run out of enemies. Weeks later, Germany surrenders. In the Pacific, the pattern repeats one final time. April 1st, 1945. Okinawa. Rain turns the ground to sludge. Japanese defenses are layered deep, designed to maximize American casualties. Marines and Army units attack ridge after ridge, bunker after bunker. The fighting lasts for months. Allied naval forces support from offshore. British carriers strike airfields. But the ground war, the attrition belongs almost entirely to the Americans. By the time Okinawa falls, the casualty lists are staggering. Commanders look ahead to the invasion of Japan itself and understand what it will mean if the same approach continues. This realization shapes the final, terrible decision. When atomic bombs are dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they are not just weapons, they are a rejection of attritional invasion on an unimaginable scale. American leadership calculates that ending the war instantly, however horrific, will save hundreds of thousands of soldiers who would otherwise be ordered to attack head-on. The logic is grim, it is consistent. When the war finally ends, the United States stands victorious not alone, but undeniably central. Its approach to warfare has altered the outcome of the conflict and the expectations of future wars. Allied nations reflect on what they witnessed. British officers acknowledge that without American aggression and industrial power, the war might have dragged on for years. Canadians recognize that American pressure allowed their own forces to fight more deliberately. Even critics concede that momentum mattered, yet admiration is tempered by unease. The cemeteries tell a story that victory speeches cannot. Rows upon rows of white markers stretch across Normandy, Belgium, Italy, and the Pacific Islands. Each represents a man who advanced when told, trusting that his sacrifice served a purpose. For those who survived, memory is complicated. Private Daniel Mercer returns to Ohio thinner, quieter, older. The factory he once worked in is still running, still producing now for peace. He watches machines stamp steel and thinks of beaches and hedgerows and men who never came home. He does not resent the orders he followed. But he does not glorify them either. Historians later argue about doctrine, about whether American attacks were necessary or excessive, about alternative strategies that might have reduced losses. They compare casualty rates, timelines, and decisions made under impossible pressure. What remains undeniable is this: the United States fought the Second World War as a war of momentum and material. Where others maneuvered, the Americans advanced. Where others waited, the Americans attacked. They did so because they could, and because they believed ending the war faster was worth the cost. The shock felt by allies and enemies alike was not just about tactics, it was about scale. About an army backed by an entire continent, willing to convert industrial power into battlefield pressure without pause. That approach would define American warfare for generations to come in Korea, in Vietnam, in conflicts still unfolding. But its origin lies here, in the mud of Normandy, the jungles of the Pacific, the forests of Belgium, and the ashes of Germany, in places where men were told to move forward while others held back and did so until there was nothing left to fight. This is why Americans attacked while Allies took cover, not because they were careless with lives, but because they believed momentum itself could end a war.